As the election is taking place, we've got several hundred election observers who've been accredited by the IEBC. They've come into the country. Several in-country, several foreign observers who have arrived through various missions. One of those missions is the East African Community Observer Mission, which is being led by former Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete. It brings in several leaders. One of them is Robert Chagulanyi, who is a former presidential candidate in Uganda. Bobi Wine is a Ugandan artist. He's an activist. He's a leader of the National Unity Platform in Uganda. He's in the country as one of the observers, and he joins us on the line. Good morning, Bobby.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
You are here as an observer.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, I am here joining a team of election observers led by the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Mariam, together with the Brian Tass Foundation. And we join many other observers from the rest of the world. Personally, it is both observing and also taking lessons, practical lessons back home. Kenya is just our next door neighbor, and we want to get to this level of democracy. Like I've always been saying, Kenya is not where they want to be, but they're certainly on the road to where they want to be. And we all want to be here in terms of democracy.
So, I mean, just speaking with you yesterday and then coming into today, it is clear that you will be going round to different areas. I mean, obviously, because you're in the capital today, has already started for you a few minutes after 8 o'clock. And you talk about wanting to, mirror Kenya's democracy. What are some of the things that you've seen so far during this election that are pointers towards that democracy?
Well, I came in 2 days ago, and since the day I came in, it was interesting. I will speak in comparison to Uganda because that's where I come from. We just had a general election last year, but the atmosphere is completely different. I mean, even when I was coming in, I did not see the heavy military deployment. I did not see massive public arrests and abductions that are ongoing. But also, in my view, the places that I'm observing, we started observing as early as 5:15. But I see the election moving smoothly. I saw, I did not see fights or any clashes. And now I see people lining up. I don't see voter suppression like I see at home. So it's a big difference from what I see, from what it was back home. And also to mention, Kenya has received more than 15,000 election observers. We were able to visit, teams were able to visit various presidential candidates, to interact with them. On the contrary, in Uganda, I was a presidential candidate last year, but not even one election observer came to speak to me. I didn't see one. Well, I'm aware that the European Union and US election observers were blocked from coming in. But it's interesting that not even other countries were able to reach to me. It is interesting, if not surprising, that the internet is on when you're having an election.
Why do you say
electricity is on?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Why do you say interesting as opposed to surprising?
It is, I mean, it's as if you people are not having an election. How come you still have internet? How come you still have the radios are still on? How come the telephones are working? Is this a presidential election? How come I don't see the military abducting people?
From what
it's giving me an impression that Kenya is very many miles, million miles away from Uganda, which is not the case.
You know, one of the things about electoral processes, as you say correctly, is that sometimes you see differences, but the differences arise if you go a little back into history and understand where people have come from. We in Kenya have been fortunate in that right from our independence, we've had a fairly peaceful existence, with the exception of 2007, 2008, when we had, well, there were issues in 1992, 1997. But we haven't had the sort of turmoil that some of our neighbors have had. So there has existed a continuous history of peace. And then when it came to transition from the one-party state to multipartyism, we actually have had a transition. A president's term comes to an end, they exit, somebody else comes in. So certain traditions have made it possible for certain things to happen the way you see them. But it doesn't mean that our electoral process is free of problems. It has problems. And as you stay here long enough, you will observe that we have our own unique issues that arise. They may not be similar to the ones in the country that you come from, but we also have our unique problems. The thing you'll observe, though, the process of voting in this country is extremely peaceful. It's always peaceful. All our problems arise after the elections and when the voting, the counting begins. That's where our problems tend to arise. But the process of voting, it is, as you have observed correctly, it's extremely peaceful.
Well, I really appreciate that. I know that you certainly have problems like many parts of the world. And I'm not in any way suggesting that the democracy in Kenya is perfect and it is where it should be. But it is something to learn. You know, I definitely appreciate that you've had your own challenges, the challenges of 2007. And in the past, I noticed that Kenya has also in the past experienced some authoritarianism, particularly in the days of former President Arap Moi. I understand that even one of the presidential candidates had to spend almost 10 years in prison. I understand what is really amazing is how Kenya has been able to mature very fast, how Kenyan democracy is growing and moving forward, not moving backwards. The ability for Kenya to learn through her problems and progress is what should be there for every African country to learn, particularly her sister, Uganda. You will notice that Uganda has had turbulent past. We have faced Idi Amin. We have had a civil war that brought in General Yoweri Museveni. And all that was premised on rigging elections. Therefore, it is only saddening that Uganda has not learnt from that turbulent past as Kenya has. It is my hope and prayer that the next generation will look at Kenya and copy the good things that are there to learn from Kenya, and certainly keep away from the negatives that have, been in Kenya. I noticed that in the past, the politics has been of Kenya has been very tribalized. That seems to be changing, and it's my hope and prayer that it will change and finally win away, so that all Kenyans are Kenyans. And I looked at not in the lenses of tribe. So I noticed that Kenya has had their challenges.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I wanted to ask this question. As observers, what exactly are you supposed to do? This observation that you have, what does it entail? Because I'm sure at the end of the process, there will be some reporting that you have to do. So what are you looking into? What are you determining? And when you do report, what will you be reporting on?
Thank you. And as you see, it is observing. Which observation, in my view, does not even go to the depth and detail that it should be doing. I know that election observers in many ways do Africa a disservice. They tend to look more at diplomacy rather than democracy. And even when an election has been terrible, observers tend to give it a clean bill of health. You have seen in countries where observers have come, enjoyed the country as if they're on holiday, then give it a clean bill of health, only to have eruptions after the elections. So I am observing, but like I said, for me it's half observing and half learning. So I cannot pretend to say that I am seeing every detail and that what I report is the accurate to the T. However, I will report on what I think people need to learn, and my reporting is largely, because I'm not leading the team, my reporting is largely to the wider population, the things we tweet and all the others, not the official documents that we sign, because in any case, I believe they change very little, if any at all.
Something that has always been of interest to me, observers and the team that comes from East Africa are East Africans, and because they're East Africans, they will have intimate knowledge and understanding of what East Africans go through. But then we have observers that come from the West. We've had EU observers. Some come from other parts, other countries in the West. Now, would you know if the roles that you're supposed to play in an electoral process are the same?
Thank you very much. It is unfortunate. I am an African. I am an East African. I am home. However, I will give it to the foreigners. I don't know if we do it deliberately, we as Africans and particularly East Africans, to just legitimize what is there, because observers from particularly the European Union tend to come, they observe the election all through, they observe the democracy, not just the election.
Yeah.
Because as you know, an election is not just an event, but a process. They tend to come into the country several months before the election. They have staff that stays in the country. But in this particular election, I'm aware that they came in months before today, and they will stay months after today. Therefore, I look at that as an effective observation, other than ours that come in a few days to the election, are largely confined to our hotels and comfort areas. You show up at the polling stations for a few minutes and then head out. So I also think that we as Africans, and East Africans in particular, have to own up our responsibility, have to be more vigilant than the foreigners. We have to do this for ourselves. Unfortunately, the West seems to have more interest in our democracy than ourselves, and that is something that must change. And also, you notice that the West, particularly the EU and the US, tend to have more confidence to even point out what has not gone right in an election, other than we, the Africans. We tend not to want to offend our neighbors or our counterparts. Observers from the East African community and observers representing the African Union tend to be just a rubber stamp. Otherwise, how can the African Union say that the elections in countries in West Africa where I'll give an example of Equatorial Guinea. There had just been an election, and the African Union cleared it that it was free and fair, only for the military to carry out a coup later on. Look at the case of Uganda in the recently concluded joke of an election. The African Union did not have the balls to speak the truth that the European Union spoke. So this is something to remind all of us that nobody is going to fix Africa. If we let Africa or East Africa go to the dogs, then we will, somebody else, unfortunately foreigners, will tell us the truth which we are supposed to tell to ourselves, so that it helps us grow.
Bobby, I want to go back to something that you said previously, whereby you're from the, more or less from the outside looking in. And something that we've kind of alluded to several occasions is that, Kenya maybe, and it's people just don't realize just how much of a peaceful leadership and governance situation exists here. If you have to come from somewhere else and observe what happens here, probably then giving light to some of the things that you have just said. And so when we talk about keeping the peace sometimes, and we look at the situation in Kenya, it's incomparable to what happens in other countries on the continent. So there have been peace messages that have been spread for months before this election. There has then been the reminder that, never again should Kenya get to the point whereby we've seen violence erupt like has in, previous years. But then looking at the balance that you speak of, that exists here, what would you then say to the situation to say, you have a pretty good deal going on here. What would you encourage in terms of fostering and nurturing that political situation?
Thank you. I have mentioned it, I'll say it again, that Kenya is certainly not where it wants to be or where it should be in terms of democracy, but it's clearly on the path to where it should and deserves to be, and Kenya should be applauded for that. The ability of Kenyans and Kenyan leaders to learn from the turbulent past, from the challenges that they've had, in my view, has played a big role. 2007 is something for Kenyans to learn from, and also from the Kenyan leaders. The fact that some of them had to even be taken to the ICC is something that they've learned from. So we give it to the Kenyans. I know that the leaders have learned their part. They've learned that their contribution, their actions or lack of actions that lead to instability are something for them to watch out. But also for the people of Kenya, if I were them, which I am not, I would really not take for granted the goodness that is there. Their ability to go to the polls unhindered should be is an opportunity that should be embraced for them to turn out in large numbers and peacefully assert their voices.
Bobby, you say you're in the country with a team that's being led by former Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. Who else is in this particular mission of yours?
Who else is in this mission?
Yes.
Yeah, from Uganda, I came along with Dr. Kiza Besigye, a fellow opposition leader from a sister political party, the FDC, and a four-time presidential candidate. I came along with the Secretary General of the party that I lead, the National Unity Platform, Mr. David Lewis Luvongoya. Then from Tanzania, there's a comrade, from Tanzania, there's Honorable Pendo Peneza, and another opposition leader, Zito Kabwe. We have a team from South Africa, some MPs from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from Somaliland, and other African countries.
Okay. We thank you very much for speaking to us this morning, and we wish you all the best as you traverse the country observing this particular exercise.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Asante sana. Bobi Wine, Robert Chagulanyi, is a former presidential candidate in last year's presidential election in Uganda. He is an activist in Uganda and the leader of the National Unity Platform. He is here in the country with one observer mission that's being led by a former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Mariam Desalegn, as an election observer. There are various observer missions in this country. There's this one, there's another one by the EAC, there's another one by several civil society organizations, there's one led by the local civil society organizations, the Elections Observation Group, and several others. Even the AU, of course, has a mission in the country.